Hey guys, Tina here. Today I'm doing just a short video with some of my thoughts and opinions on the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde book by Robert Louis Stevenson. Now, I read this book last month and, had some time to think about it. And the thing is, the more I thought about it, the more I liked it, because at the time of reading it, I didn't think it was anything special. And then, I thought about doing a review, and the more I thought about it, the more, things started to sip out and, worm their way into my thoughts, and I just wanted to, point some of those out here. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a gothic mystery novel, which, those were really popular in the late 1800s, and this is part of that genre. And it's basically a mystery. We have Mr. Utterson, who is a lawyer, and he learns of Mr. Hyde and his evil deeds. But he also recognizes the name from one of his wills that Dr. Jekyll, had him write, and he realizes that Mr. Hyde is the benefactor of that will. And since Dr. Jekyll is also his friend, Mr. Utterson's friend, he's worried, that Jekyll is being blackmailed by Hyde, in any way. So he's trying to figure out what the connection is, and it's actually not until the end of the book that we get to see and learn alongside with him how the two characters are actually connected. So we actually realize that Jekyll created Hyde by making a potion, that actually separated the two. And his intent was, he was a really well-known doctor, he was wealthy, well-off, and really respected, and he didn't want to, damage that reputation that he has worked so hard for. But he did feel this, he had these inclinations to do some bad things, and he figured that, creating Hyde would actually be a perfect solution to that, because, those evil deeds would be connected to Hyde and not in any way to himself. So he makes a potion and we get Hyde. And, for me it's funny because we are so, these days we always have, the good twin and the bad twin. And it's really interesting for me that, they don't look anything alike. Jekyll is tall, wealthy, I guess he's, better looking than Hyde, because Hyde is always described as this roguish, smallish, brutish type of a man, but no actual details are given, and it's funny because if you create something from yourself, I would kind of imagine that they would look the same, but no. And it's really interesting in that regard. And this duality that is so prominent in this book, it's I think there's a lot of discussion that can be done on this subject, what it actually represents. It's like, the society with the wealthy and the poor, because, the wealthy were wealthy and rich and educated, and the poor were kind of, I think, viewed as uneducated and, like thuggish, and maybe that's it. There's a lot of options that you can pick and choose from, actually, I think, here. But the one that really interests me is the duality of human nature, because obviously we all have good and bad traits, and usually the good win, but sometimes the bad do take charge and wreak havoc in our lives. And that's the same with Jekyll. Jekyll has good and bad traits, unlike Hyde, who is just bad. He's pure evil. He's bad. He doesn't have any good traits, and he's not really an equivalent to Jekyll, because he's basically just a caricature. He's not a person, not a realistic person anyways, which is also interesting, that this actually happened, because, I don't know, it's weird, for something to be just bad. And I think that these days even, we actually, caricatures like, media making, caricatures out of politicians or famous people, because somebody is purely bad, and, but the funny thing is that, over time people actually start believing that somehow, and if you ask them, why is this person bad, they are not even sure why they think it, that person is bad. And it's weird how our minds work. And with Jekyll, the thing is that, over time, he struggles actually to remain himself, because the more he lets Hyde out, so the more, he allows his evil nature to take control, the harder it is to rein it in. And slowly Hyde takes over, and I think, you know, it's sort of like an addiction. You know, if you love something, if you abuse something, that's gonna happen. So with him, it was evil. It could be, you know, just alcohol, drugs, whatever. It's you know, a wide spectrum of things that you could compare to this evil thing, you know. So while I was reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, another book came to mind, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which I think must have come out at roughly the same time as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm not entirely sure, and it's interesting that both these books have this basically the same duality in them, because with Oscar Wilde we have well, Dorian is this beautiful young man who is adored and loved, you know, basically because of his looks, and you know, throughout the book you realize that he's evil, he's bad, he allows himself to do anything because he physically doesn't take the brunt of that. Everything that he does is shown on the portrait, which suffers, you know, for it. And he also doesn't get older. He doesn't, you know, none of his evilness shows on his face or body. And it's really interesting because it's sort of the same like with Dr. Jekyll, who has an outlet in Hyde, and Dorian has an outlet in his own portrait. So I think it's really curious that this theme was so prominent in the literature back then. Sure, I mean, you can apply it to our society today as well, I'm sure. So yes, those were just some of my thoughts on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If you read the book, please leave me down a comment and let me know whether or not you agree with my assessment, or whether or not you saw something else in the book. And yeah, see you in the next video. Bye.